crucial thing to understand. And the argument has been made by some Palestinian Authority officials that, well, if Palestine is recognized as a state, it changes the nature of the dispute with Israel. We become a state under occupation, and suddenly by some form of magic, the world is going to mobilize against Israel in a way that it hasn't through 63 years of ethnic cleansing and occupation and denial of Palestinian rights. By simply saying that the thing under occupation is a state is somehow going to change all the dynamics, and by magic this is going to happen. This was put by Riyad al-Malki, the so-called foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, who said a few months ago, such recognition would create political and legal pressure on Israel to withdraw its forces from the land of another state that is recognized within the 1967 borders. Of course, anybody who knows anything about the history of the region knows that this is, magical thinking. And we can see that from several examples. Lebanon, of course, and Syria have been member states of the United Nations since 1945, founding charter members. And this hasn't stopped Israel from occupying their territory for decades without anybody lifting a finger to do anything about it. I feel certain that if there had not been a resistance in Lebanon to the Israeli occupation of the south of that country, which lasted 22 years in defiance of UN resolutions calling for an immediate Israeli withdrawal, if there had not been resistance, there would be Israeli settlers building homes and dancing on Lebanese land and drinking stolen water from Lebanon and claiming that God gave it to them in the Bible. And the UN and Catherine Ashton would be wringing their hands and doing nothing about it. That's the reality of power in the region. And simply making a declaration that a fantasy state exists doesn't change that reality at all. What matters is the power on the ground. The other argument that's been made in favor of this by some people is that, well, if Palestine were recognized as a member of the United Nations, this would give the Palestinians the possibility to go to the International Criminal Court in The Hague to pursue Israeli war criminals. I'm not a legal scholar, so I can't tell you if that's true or not. But let's assume it is true for the sake of argument, that Palestine would now have access to this court. Is that a sufficient reason to go through with this? And there I think the answer again has to be no, because already the Palestinian Authority is not using the legal means that are available to it to get justice for the Palestinians. And the two specific examples of that is the way the Palestinian Authority worked to sabotage the Goldstone report as it was going through the United Nations, to delay it and defer it so that it couldn't advance. And we now know without any doubt that this was under direct pressure from the United States. This was revealed in the Palestine papers, which were leaked by Al Jazeera in January, and we know more about it since then as well. The other example is the Israeli attack on the Gaza flotilla and the Mavi Marmara in May of 2010, when documents which were leaked to the Electronic Intifada, we received drafts which we were able to authenticate of a resolution that was to be adopted by the Security Council or by the Human Rights Council calling for an investigation. And what we know is that the initial draft circulated by the Turkish Foreign Ministry was very strong, and it called for an independent investigation. And then the Palestinian Authority delegation at the United Nations, working with the British and the French, were putting forward alternative drafts that were much weaker and would have not allowed for a UN Human Rights Council investigation. They would have allowed only the investigation which was done at the behest of the Secretary General, the so-called Palmer Report, which we know turned into a very biased and politically motivated document exonerating Israel. But Turkey was able to circumvent the Palestinian Authority and British effort to sabotage the resolution and to ensure that an independent investigation was done by the Human Rights Council. And that report remains the most authoritative version, fully investigated, of what happened when Israel attacked the Mavi Marmara. But it's so important to remember that it wouldn't have happened if the Palestinian Authority had gotten its way. So the question you have to ask is, would these same people, just by changing their name into the State of Palestine, or the government of the State of Palestine, suddenly be free from all of the pressure and all of the subservience which has led them to follow this path? I see no reason to assume that, given the financial blackmail that they're under from the European Union and the United States, and the total deliberate dependency that has been created for the Palestinian people. I mean, it was one thing that people may not know is that Palestinians are now, per capita, the largest recipients of international aid. And that's in a context in which Palestinians are getting poorer and poorer and worse off and worse off. And this aid is not helping Palestinians, it is in fact just making them more dependent. So instead of Gaza having an independent economy and being able to export its manufactured goods and its agricultural produce to Europe and to markets in the region as it was doing, because of the Euro-American-Israeli blockade on Gaza, there's no exports, no manufacturing, no importation of raw materials to transform into higher value-added goods, and instead you have 65% of households in Gaza dependent on food handouts. That's a matter of policy. Gaza wasn't hit by a tsunami. It was hit by earthquake Israel. Since we had an earthquake in the Netherlands. So this policy of reducing the Palestinians to dependence, to turning hundreds of thousands of families into recipients of salaries from the European Union, means that the European Union keeps political control of the Palestinian Authority. That's why Abbas is negotiating with Catherine Ashton and not the Palestinian people. So, I think I made my views pretty clear. On the other hand, maybe we should support it because... But the final point I want to make about it, I mean, what I've argued so far is that it's fuzzy and unlikely to result in any substantial legal act. The second is that even if there were a state of Palestine admitted by the UN, it makes no practical difference on the ground. And the third point I want to make is about the legitimacy of those who are taking this initiative. And I cannot put it better than the Palestinian grassroots anti-apartheid wall campaign, which issued a statement, stopthewall.org for short, that issued a statement on September 7th, which I think summed up so well the concerns that have been expressed across Palestinian civil society. And I'm just going to read a segment of, it's a long statement of several pages. Oh, you have copies, fantastic. It's several pages, but I do want to emphasize a couple of points that they make. And they say, 2 weeks from the crucial date of September 21st, still no one knows what the text and details of the proposed initiative at the UN are. As many Palestinian organizations, intellectuals, and activists have stated, we will not and cannot support an initiative, the content of which we do not know. The core of the issue is the fact that our leadership has moved this initiative forward without any open discussion about it, and now wants the Palestinian people to blindly support it. This is indicative of a much deeper problem within the Palestinian body politic and begs an urgent call for transparency, accountability, and popular participation. Palestinians all remember the moment in 1993 when the Palestinian leadership took everyone by surprise, presenting them with the fully negotiated Oslo Accords. After decades of struggle, sacrifice, and suffering of a people in its entirety, there was trust in the leadership. We believed them when they assured us that the Oslo Accords were a step towards the attainment of our rights. Nobody was really informed about the Paris Accords, the economic agreement that completed the Oslo Accords and further strangled Palestinian life. In the following 20 years, the same people that negotiated Oslo continued negotiations in secretive meetings and without any publicly and collectively agreed upon terms of reference. As the Palestine papers published by Al Jazeera ultimately revealed, the many rumors told about these endless negotiations behind closed doors were real. Far too many times our negotiators have negotiated about our rights themselves rather than for ways to attain them. And I think just that segment really sums up the crisis of legitimacy this leadership has. But the whole statement is worth reading. But this statement isn't unique. We've seen expressions like this from many segments of Palestinian civil society, inside Palestine and outside. For example, the United States Palestinian Communities Network, which is a across North America organization of Palestinians, issued a statement totally rejecting it and saying that they view this move as dangerous and possibly putting at risk fundamental Palestinian rights, because any state that's admitted without acknowledging the right of return, or if a state, if a non-existent state of Palestine takes a seat at the UN and replaces the PLO, then you've also disenfranchised the Palestinian diaspora as well. Many individuals have written about this as well, including myself. And the Boycott National Committee in Palestine, the BNC, which is the steering group of the Palestinian-led boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign, issued two statements that I think are very important on this. And they make 2 points, or they each make a crucial point. One is that regardless of what happened in September, the nature of the struggle doesn't change. The